Okay, this is going to be a series of videos, so the one you're watching is only one of a series, and I do encourage you to watch the rest of them. Also, I encourage you to watch the full-length webumentary titled Global Warming, Myth or Reality, A Skeptic's View. It goes through the entire science behind global warming, but with this series, we're going to pick and choose some interesting pieces, and we're going to ask the viewer, does global warming pass the stink test? We're going to take a look at the science, and I want you to ask yourself, does that even make sense? Most importantly, ask yourself, if a big oil company produced a report like that, wouldn't the environmentalists be going ape nuts? Because what we're going to do is we're going to take a hard look at the science, and then once again, just ask yourself, does this pass the stink test? Okay, well, let's take a look at it. Once again, you got to just look at the logic of the global warming theorists. They claim that increasing in CO2 causes an increase in temperature, but from their very own chart, as you can see, and I've highlighted here, you can see that on their very own chart, CO2 remains very high and temperatures plummet through the floor. Whenever you create a cause and effect model, like you claim CO2 increases and then temperature, what you have to show is that CO2 increases, then there's a lag, and then temperature increases. In fact, the very opposite occurs. This is what's called a misspecified statistical model. They have their independent and dependent variable mixed up. Any statistician would catch this right off the bat. Somehow it eludes the global warming community. Their own charts prove it otherwise. If you do your own research, you'll see that the correlation between temperature and CO2 has temperature as the driving factor, as the independent, and CO2 as the dependent. What does that mean? That means that temperatures increase, and then 600 to 1400 years later, CO2 increases. There is no way for an increase in CO2 1400 years in the future to cause an increase in temperature today. That's like saying, let's say the water's boiling today, but 1,000 years from now I turn the burner on. They have their model backwards. This would fail statistics or basic science 101, and yet the global warming community has reached a consensus on something where their own correlation shows that temperature is the independent variable and CO2 is the dependent variable, and yet they basically ignore the common sense and basic scientific practices. Better yet, if you look at the most accurate temperature readings that we have, come from NASA. These are rocket scientists, by the way. They use satellite and balloon measurements. According to them, global warming climate monitoring, the accuracy of satellite data, March 12, 1997. Recently, much scientific debate has focused on the global temperature of the Earth's lowest atmosphere as measured by orbiting satellites, and while these data are exceedingly precise, verified by multiple satellite observations and balloon measurement taken in situ, they reveal no discernible warming trends in the Earth's lower atmosphere over the last 18 plus years. Now I ask you, if you have one chart taken from NASA, satellites, multiple measurements, and one chart that it uses tree rings, coral and ice core for your temperature measurement, who are you going to go with? Clearly you would use the direct measurement of NASA over the proxies given by the hockey stick chart, and yet they don't. But most importantly, the most accurate direct measurement of temperature that we have, that comes from NASA, that comes from rocket scientists, shows no discernible warming trend in the last 18 plus years. How can you have a scientific community have a consensus when it totally disagrees with the most accurate readings they have? So let's put all the pieces together. Here is a close-up of the temperature reading charts that they have. The first thing you should notice is that the early part of the century you had a rapid rise in temperature. Then between 1940 and 1980 temperatures actually fell. Now my understanding is that CO2 has been continually increasing throughout that time period. So what did we do? Just simply put a halt to the Industrial Revolution, put a halt to this cause and effect relationship that for some reason CO2 no longer caused an increase in temperature. Okay, but look at the own chart. There's a huge pause, a cooling between 1940 and 1980. Now remember what NASA said over the last 18 plus years. Okay, 18 plus goes back from 2000 to 1980. So in that chart, that second half should be flat according to NASA. So if you combine the two charts, it shows that all that warming occurred in the very first half of the century, if in fact you believe their charts. So if you put all the pieces together, you can see this is all a bunch of junk. The other thing you notice here is the black arrows is the rate of ascent or the rate of increase of CO2. CO2, according to their own charts, has a very rapid increase in the second half of the century, and yet the temperature rate of increase stays the same. You would expect that if CO2 increases at an increasing rate, so would temperature. That's not found. In fact, NASA says that during this period of rapid CO2 increases, temperatures have been stable.